I found my elderly parents left freezing outside my own home, while my in-laws celebrated inside as if they ruled the place. The steps I took next shattered their lives beyond repair. Okay, you guys, I have to tell you something that still makes my blood run cold, even now. Have you ever had a moment where everything you thought you knew about your life, your home, and even your spouse shattered in an instant? Because I did, and it all started with my parents shivering outside my own front door, while inside, a party raged that I didn't even recognize. I mean, can you believe that? My own parents, in their 70s, with my dad clutching his chest after heart surgery, completely locked out. And what happened next? Well, it changed everything for all of us. My name's Peggy and I'm 35. Growing up, my parents gave me everything. And I mean everything they possibly could, even though we didn't have much. My dad worked 2 jobs for 20 years. His hands were always rough from work, but so gentle when he held mine. My mom was a magician with money. She'd stretch every dollar, making sure I never felt the pinch of our financial limitations. When I got into college, they emptied their tiny savings without a second thought. They never once complained about the sacrifices they made for me. My dad, bless his heart, developed serious heart problems in his 60s. 8 months before all this, he had a triple bypass. His recovery was steady, but fragile. He needed his medication, he needed to take it easy. And my mom's rheumatoid arthritis had gotten so bad over the past decade that simple things, like opening a door or holding a cup, were a struggle. Still, they were fiercely independent, living in the same small ranch house where I grew up, just 15 minutes from me. Our family traditions were sacred. Sunday dinners, daily calls on my lunch break, those were non-negotiable. They were so proud of me, framing my first business card on their fridge. When I got my first big promotion, my dad actually cried, saying I'd exceeded all his wildest dreams for me. Then Robert walked into my life, 7 years ago. We met at an industry conference. He was from a competing agency, but he just charmed the pants off me. He was confident, ambitious, just like me. We connected instantly over our shared passion for creative marketing. It was a whirlwind, really. Coffee turned into dinner, dinner turned into romance, and within a year we were married. Looking back, even our wedding had these little warning signs, but I was so in love, I just chose to ignore them. Our early marriage was idyllic. We supported each other's careers, celebrated every win, bought a starter condo we spent weekends painting and furnishing. Robert would even make Sunday breakfast before we headed to my parents for dinner. He genuinely seemed to like them back then, bringing my dad his special coffee, helping my mom with little repairs around the house. But then, the subtle warning signs started. Robert would always, and I mean always, take calls from his parents, no matter what we were doing. Their opinions just seemed to outweigh everyone else's, even mine. My first proper encounters with my in-laws, Nancy and Walter, should have screamed red flag. They showed up at our engagement party in matching designer outfits, practically sniffing around my parents' modest home with this thinly veiled disdain. Nancy actually said, "How charming to see simple living in this day and age." And Walter asked my dad about his investment portfolio, then scoffed when Dad mentioned his pension. During wedding planning, they insisted on controlling everything that was traditionally the bride's family's domain. "You clearly haven't been to many proper weddings, dear," Nancy told me when I picked wildflowers for my bouquet. "Let me handle this, so you don't embarrass Robert." Robert, bless his heart, minimized it all. "Oh, Mother's just particular," he'd say. "Their intentions are good. They just want the best for us. They come from a different world." And I believed him. I wanted to believe him. I convinced myself they'd warm up to me and my family eventually. My career, though, was on fire. I was accelerating faster than Robert. After 5 years at my marketing firm, I landed this massive pharmaceutical client that completely transformed our agency. My innovative campaign strategy earned me a huge promotion and a substantial performance bonus. When I called Robert with the news, his congratulations sounded genuine. But when I got home with champagne to celebrate, he was sullen. "Great work," he said, barely touching his glass. "I guess I need to step up my game to keep up with you." I suggested using my bonus as a down payment on a house, something we talked about, but never seriously pursued. That actually seemed to snap him out of his funk. He called his parents immediately. That weekend, Walter showed up with printouts of neighborhoods he deemed acceptable, all way above our budget. When I mentioned more affordable options, Nancy patted my hand condescendingly. This is why generational wealth matters, dear. You think small because that's what you know. Ouch. Despite all their interference, we found a perfect Tudor-style home in a prestigious neighborhood. It stretched our budget, but it was feasible with my bonus. I contributed 70% of the down payment, a fact Robert asked me not to mention to his parents. They just assume I'm doing well enough to handle this, he explained. Why disappoint them? That house was everything I'd worked for. 3 bedrooms for a future family, a home office for late nights, and most importantly, a first-floor guest suite. Perfect for my parents as they aged and might need to stay with us. Robert seemed less enthusiastic about that feature, but he agreed it was practical. Then, during their first visit to the new house, my in-laws showed up with a decorator. They walked through every room, taking notes without asking our permission. Nancy pointed out every flaw, from the kitchen that had been renovated just 5 years prior to the cramped master bedroom that was twice the size of our old condo. We'll fix all this, she assured Robert. Not me, of course. Your father knows people who can transform this place. As our housewarming party approached, I spent weeks planning a warm, intimate gathering. I carefully selected food my dad could eat with his dietary restrictions, arranged seating for my mom's arthritis. Our closest friends, my colleagues, and of course, both sets of parents were on the guest list. When I asked Robert for details about his guests, he vaguely mentioned some couples his parents socialized with, and assured me it would only be 4 or 5 additional people. I compromised, wanting harmony more than control, but a growing uneasiness settled in my stomach. The morning of the party dawned bright and crisp, with that perfect fall chill that just makes you want to cozy up indoors. I woke up early, buzzing with excitement to showcase our new home. Robert, though, seemed distracted. He was checking his phone constantly, giving me one-word answers when I asked about the catering order. My parents texted, he finally said as I loaded the dishwasher. They're running early, might get here before the official start time. The party was scheduled for 6 p.m., giving my parents time to rest after their afternoon meds and still get home at a reasonable hour. It was barely 10 a.m. How early are we talking? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Maybe around 3 p.m. They want to help set up. I bit back my initial response. Help could be welcome, right? That should be fine, I replied, mentally adjusting my timeline. Just remind them that my parents will need the accessibility accommodations we discussed. Robert nodded absently, already typing a response to another message. At precisely 12:45 p.m., while I was arranging a vegetable platter, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Nancy and Walter, impeccably dressed in clothing far too formal for a casual housewarming. And behind them, 6 other couples, all equally overdressed, holding gifts and wine bottles. Surprise! Nancy exclaimed, stepping past me without waiting for an invitation. We thought we'd make a day of it. Everyone was so excited to see Robert's new home. I stood frozen as this parade of strangers filed into my house. Nancy making introductions I immediately forgot, desperately searching for Robert. He emerged from our bedroom, looking suspiciously well-dressed himself, greeting his parents with an enthusiasm that told me this early arrival was no surprise to him. Darling, I whispered when I finally pulled him aside. What is happening? Just a slight change of plans, he replied, straightening his tie. Mother thought it would be nice to have a proper luncheon before the evening gathering. These are important people in my parents' circle. Before I could even respond, Nancy was beside us, critiquing the simple decorations I'd carefully placed around the living room. These are charming in their way, she said, removing a handmade centerpiece my mother and I had created. But I brought some more suitable arrangements. She snapped her fingers, and Walter brought in these elaborate floral displays that must have cost hundreds. Over the next hour, I watched in stunned silence as my carefully planned party transformed. Nancy rearranged furniture, shoved our family photos into drawers, and replaced them with artistic arrangements I'd never seen. Walter's friends brought in cases of expensive wine, making dismissive comments about my selections. Robert mentioned you were still developing your palate. One man commented, placing my wine bottles out of sight. The real shock came when a catering van pulled into our driveway, and 3 uniformed servers started unloading equipment I had never ordered. "We took the liberty," Walter explained when he caught my confused expression. "Your grocery store platters were thoughtful, but not quite appropriate for the guests we invited." Throughout this complete takeover, Robert avoided me. He was busy helping his father set up an impromptu bar in our dining room, or escorting newly arriving guests on tours of our home. With each passing minute, I felt more and more like a stranger in my own house. The final, absolute straw came when I overheard Nancy referring to the home as Robert's new place to a woman dripping in diamonds. "We always knew he'd end up in this neighborhood," she said. "Of course, there will need to be significant upgrades if they start a family. The kitchen is workable, but hardly up to standard." Walter joined them, adding, "We're discussing converting the guest suite into a proper library. Much better use of a space." The guest suite, the one I had specifically chosen for my parents. I finally cornered Robert in our bedroom, where he was, inexplicably, changing into an even more formal shirt. "What is happening?" I demanded. "Who are these people? Why is your mother removing our things and talking about renovation plans we never discussed?" "Peggy, you're overreacting," he said, his voice low but irritated. "These are influential people who can help both our careers. Mother is just excited and maybe overstepping a bit, but it's coming from a good place." "Overstepping, Robert? There are caterers in our kitchen that I did not hire. Your mother is talking about removing the guest suite we planned for my parents. And speaking of my parents, I need to leave soon to pick them up." A flash of something like panic crossed his face. "About that, Mother thought it might be better if your parents came another time. This gathering has become more formal than we planned." I stared at him, ice forming in my chest. "My parents are coming. This is our housewarming, not your mother's social climbing event. I am leaving to pick them up in 20 minutes, and I expect you to make sure they are welcomed properly." Nancy appeared in the doorway, as if summoned by our disagreement. "Everything all right in here, Robert? Senator Wilson is asking about your work on the Thompson campaign." "Coming, Mother," Robert replied, turning from me without resolving our conversation. Before heading out, I found Robert again, surrounded by his father's friends. "I'm going to get my parents now. Please remember that Dad needs easy access to his medication in the refrigerator, and Mom will need her special chair with the cushions." Sure, he nodded distractedly. "We might still be at lunch when you return. Just come around to the back patio." As I drove to my parents' house, my phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "Slight change of plans. We'll explain when you get back." I called immediately, went straight to voicemail. Tried again. Same result. My parents were waiting, dressed in their Sunday best. My mom had her hair done specially. My dad proudly wore the sweater I'd given him last Christmas. "Is the house all ready for the big reveal?" Dad asked as I helped Mom into the car. "It looks wonderful," I lied, not wanting to worry them. "Everyone is excited to see you both." The knot in my stomach grew tighter as we drove back. My calls to Robert still went unanswered. When we turned onto our street, I immediately knew something was wrong. The driveway and both sides of the street were lined with luxury vehicles I didn't recognize. A young man in a valet uniform stood at the end of our driveway, looking confused as I pulled up. "Sorry, ma'am. The driveway is full. Are you here for the Cunningham dinner?" "This is my house," I said, a chill running through me that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. The valet looked embarrassed and stepped aside, letting me pull into the last remaining space near the garage. Music and laughter spilled from the house, far more than the dozen or so people I'd left behind. My mother looked at me with confusion. "My goodness, how many people did you invite, dear?" "Not this many," I admitted, helping her from the car while Dad slowly extracted himself. We approached the front door, my father already breathing heavily from the short walk. The temperature had dropped significantly with the setting sun, and I noticed both my parents shivering slightly in their light jackets, appropriate for a quick transfer from car to house, but not for extended time outdoors. I rang the doorbell, heard its chime echo inside, but no one came. I rang again, then knocked firmly, watching through the beveled glass as figures moved past the entryway, clearly hearing but ignoring us. "Maybe they can't hear over the music," my mother suggested, pulling her jacket tighter. I knocked harder, then tried my key in the lock, only to discover it no longer worked. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Someone had changed the locks to my own home. "Let me call Robert," I said, trying to keep the panic from my voice as I dialed his number again. Straight to voicemail. I sent a text. "We are outside. The door is locked and my key is not working. Dad needs to come in now." No response. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. My father, whose color had been good earlier, now looked pale, and I noticed him pressing his hand to his chest, that way he did when trying to hide discomfort. "Dad, are you okay?" I asked, moving to his side. "Just a little winded," he said, but I could hear the strain in his voice. "Might need to sit down for a minute." My mother was visibly shivering now, her thin dress and jacket no match for the rapidly cooling evening. Her lips had taken on a bluish tinge that sent alarm bells ringing through my mind. "Let me try the back door," I said, helping my father to sit on the porch step before leading my mother around the side of the house. The back patio had been transformed into an extension of the party, with heat lamps warming elegantly dressed guests who sipped champagne under string lights I'd never seen before. Through the large kitchen windows, I could see servers in formal attire arranging food. No sign of Robert, but Nancy stood holding court near the grill, gesturing dramatically as her audience laughed on cue. I knocked on the back door. A server approached, looking annoyed at the interruption. "The entrance is around front," he said curtly. "This is a private event." "This is my house," I said, my voice rising. "My parents are freezing outside, and my father has a heart condition. Please open the door." The server looked uncertain, glancing over his shoulder toward Nancy. She noticed the commotion and approached, her face darkening when she saw me. "Peggy," she said through the glass, making no move to open the door. I thought Robert explained we had to make some adjustments to the guest list. This is an important dinner for Walter's business associates. "Nancy, open the door right now," I demanded. "My parents are outside. It's freezing, and my father needs his medication from the refrigerator." "This is really not a good time," she replied, having the audacity to look put out. "Perhaps you could take your parents for dinner somewhere and come back later. We should be wrapped up by 11. I stared at her in disbelief, unable to process the level of cruelty I was witnessing. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of Robert, drink in hand, laughing with a group of men in the living room, completely oblivious to our situation. When I returned to the front, I found my father slumped against my mother, his face contorted in pain. "Dad," I cried, pushing past startled guests to reach him. "Chest hurts," he gasped, clutching at his shirt. My mother looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "He said he feels like his last heart attack." Without hesitation, I pulled out my phone and dialed emergency services, giving them our address and my father's condition. Around me, the party had ground to an uncomfortable halt. Guests watched the drama unfold with wine glasses still in hand. Nancy appeared at Robert's side, whispering furiously, "Cannot this wait? You're embarrassing us in front of everyone." I whirled on her, phone still pressed to my ear. "My father might be having a heart attack because you left him in the cold. Do you understand that, Nancy? He could die." Walter materialized next to his wife, his face flushed with either alcohol or anger. "Now see here, young lady. There is no need for hysterics. Your father looks fine to me, just a little winded." The paramedics arrived within minutes, pushing through the crowd to reach my father. They quickly assessed his condition, determining he was showing signs of both hypothermia and cardiac distress. As they prepared to transport him to the hospital, I heard Walter complaining to Robert about the scene we were causing. I rode in the ambulance with my parents, holding my mother's trembling hand as she watched the paramedics work on my father. The hospital emergency room received us immediately, whisking my father away for treatment, while a kind nurse helped my mother, who was also showing signs of exposure. "How long were they outside in those temperatures?" the doctor asked me after examining my father. "At least 30 minutes, I replied, shame and rage battling within me. "Maybe longer." He shook his head. "With his cardiac history and age, that was dangerously long. We'll monitor him overnight. His body temperature is still below normal, and I'm concerned about the strain on his heart." My mother was treated for mild hypothermia, given warm blankets and hot drinks until her shivering subsided. She refused to leave my father's side, so the staff brought a recliner into his room where she could rest comfortably. Around midnight, As I sat watching my parents finally sleeping peacefully, my phone rang. It was Robert. "Are you coming home soon?" he asked, as if inquiring about a delayed commute rather than a family emergency. "My father is being kept overnight for observation," I replied, keeping my voice low. "I'm staying with them." "The party is winding down," he said. Your dramatic exit was quite the topic of conversation. Dramatic exit? I repeated, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Robert, my father could have had another heart attack. Do you understand that? Mother says he was clearly just cold and tired. You know how your parents exaggerate their health issues for attention." Something inside me snapped at that moment. A final thread of loyalty, or love, or whatever had been holding our marriage together, just snapped. "Robert," I said, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside. "Do not be there when I get home tomorrow." "I mean it." "You're being irrational," he replied. "Mother and father went to a lot of trouble to arrange this dinner for my benefit, for our benefit. The least you could do is be grateful for their involvement." "Grateful?" "They locked my parents out of my house and nearly killed my father. Your mother rearranged our home without permission. Your father brought in strangers who treated me like staff, and you stood by and allowed all of it." "It was a misunderstanding," he insisted. "If your parents had called ahead to confirm the timing." I hung up, unable to stomach another word of his delusional justifications. Looking at my parents, vulnerable in their hospital beds, I made a decision that would change all our lives. This would never happen again. When I returned to our house the following afternoon, having secured my father's stable condition and comfortable discharge plan for the next day, I found my in-laws still there. The party debris had been mostly cleared, but evidence remained. Wine stains on our new carpet, cigarette burns on the coffee table we'd carefully selected. Robert sat at the kitchen island, looking haggard but defiant. Nancy and Walter occupied our living room sofa, both wearing expressions of injured dignity as if they were the wronged parties. "Finally decided to come home, See," Nancy greeted me, her tone suggesting I'd been on a frivolous adventure rather than a hospital vigil. I ignored her, addressing Robert directly. "How is my father doing? Did you bother to call and check?" Robert had the grace to look slightly ashamed. "I figured you'd let me know if there was any change." Nancy stood, smoothing her immaculate slacks. "Well, now that this little drama has settled, we should discuss the dinner party. Despite your unfortunate exit, it was quite successful." Senator Wilson's aide mentioned possibly connecting Robert with their media team. I stared at her, wondering if I had entered some parallel universe where human decency didn't exist. "My father is in the hospital because of you, and you want to talk about networking opportunities?" "Now, Peggy," Walter interjected, "let us maintain perspective. Your father has health problems. That is hardly our fault. If anything, you should have considered his condition before bringing him to an evening event. An evening event at my own house, that I specifically planned with his needs in mind, before you hijacked it completely." "We didn't hijack anything," Nancy said with an imperious wave of her hand. "We simply elevated a simple gathering into something beneficial." Robert agreed with our adjustments. I turned to my husband. "Is that true? Did you agree to change the locks without telling me?" Robert shifted uncomfortably. "Mother thought our security needed upgrading. I was going to give you the new keys, but with all the preparations, it slipped my mind." "And the caterers? The valet? The 40 strangers in our living room?" "I may have mentioned to Mother that we were having a small housewarming," he admitted. "She offered to help make it special." "Special?" I repeated, incredulity rising. "Robert, they took over our home, removed our personal items, and treated my parents like unwelcome intruders. How is any of that special?" Nancy made a dismissive sound. "Your sentimentality is charming, but impractical, dear. This house has potential to be a proper entertaining space. Those little crafts and family photos are lovely for private areas, but not for public rooms." "Public rooms? This is a private home, Nancy." "Our home." "Of course it is, dear," she replied condescendingly. But Robert has always understood the importance of maintaining certain standards. His father and I have a wide social circle that can be tremendously advantageous to both of you. "Did you know they were planning this?" I asked Robert directly. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Mother mentioned possibly hosting their annual dinner here since we have more space now. I didn't realize it would be last night. When did you know? When did you realize what they were planning? Robert hesitated. When they arrived early with the first guests. But by then, everything was already in motion. And you didn't think to call me? To warn me that our housewarming had turned into your parents' networking event. I knew you'd be upset, he said, as if that explained everything. The magnitude of his betrayal washed over me in waves. Not just the party, but the fundamental misalignment of our values and priorities. Who was this man who could leave his in-laws shivering in the cold while he schmoozed with strangers who valued his parents' social climbing over basic human decency? I'm going to pack a bag, I said quietly. I cannot stay here tonight. Don't be dramatic, Peggy, Nancy interjected. Every marriage has adjustments. Robert is simply balancing family obligations. Family obligations? I turned to her, no longer bothering to hide my contempt. Is that what you call endangering my father's life? Humiliating my mother? Taking over our home without permission? We did you a favor, Walter said, his voice hard. This house was clearly beyond your experience level. Robert mentioned how you insisted on handling the decorating yourself, despite our offers to bring in professionals. As I headed upstairs to pack, I heard Nancy Stage whisper to Robert, perhaps this house was too ambitious for someone of her background. There's no shame in admitting one is out of their depth. I packed quickly, taking only essentials, aware of Robert watching from the doorway, but making no move to stop me. As I zipped my suitcase, he finally spoke. Where will you go? To check on my parents, then to Vanessa's, I replied, naming my closest friend. Don't call me unless it's an actual emergency. Nancy appeared behind Robert, her expression one of practiced concern. Running away never solved anything, dear. In my experience, young wives often get overwhelmed by the responsibilities of maintaining a proper home. I walked past them both without responding, my mind already shifting from emotional hurt to strategic planning. This was no longer about a ruined party, or even a betrayal of trust. My parents had been put in actual physical danger, and the casual cruelty with which my in-laws dismissed this fact revealed a toxicity I could no longer ignore. At Vanessa's apartment that evening, I broke down completely, releasing tears I'd held back for my parents' sake. Between sobs, I explained the surreal sequence of events, watching her expressions shift from confusion to horror. They changed your locks, she repeated, incredulous. Without telling you. And left your parents outside. They act like I'm overreacting, I said, accepting the tissue she offered. Like it was a simple miscommunication rather than deliberate exclusion. Vanessa, an attorney specializing in family law, shifted into professional mode. This is not just wrong, Peggy. It is potentially illegal. You paid for 70% of that house. They cannot lock you out or make modifications without your consent. The next day brought another layer of betrayal. Checking our joint accounts online, I discovered Robert had withdrawn a significant sum, nearly $40,000, 3 days before the party, without discussion or notification. A call to our bank confirmed it had been made in person, with Robert citing home improvements as the purpose. The same day, I found an email in our shared cloud account for catering services costing $22,000, charged to our joint credit card, and addressed to Walter, not Robert or me. My colleague Olivia, who'd become a close friend, connected me with her brother's financial advisory firm. You need to protect yourself, she insisted. If they'll do this, who knows what else they might try. The financial advisor confirmed my fears. Robert's withdrawal had cleared out most of our liquid savings. The good news, he noted, was that my name was primary on the mortgage since I provided the majority of the down payment. That gives you certain rights, regardless of what happens next. Over the next few days, as my father recovered and I divided my time between the hospital and Vanessa's guest room, I discovered more evidence of my in-laws' plans. Robert's sister, with whom I'd always maintained a cordial if distant relationship, called unexpectedly. I heard about what happened, she said, sounding genuinely concerned. I'm so sorry. They did the same thing to my husband and me 3 years ago. She explained that Nancy and Walter had a pattern of inserting themselves into their children's homes and relationships, typically after major purchases or life events. In her case, They had moved in temporarily after the birth of her first child and stayed for 8 months, gradually taking over every aspect of their household. They convinced James that I was too overwhelmed to make decisions, she said, referring to her husband. By the time they left, James and I were barely speaking, and I had no say in my own home. That conversation crystallized something I had sensed, but not fully articulated. This was not a one-time boundary violation, but the beginning of a systematic takeover. The guest suite renovations Nancy had mentioned were not idle talk, but an actual plan, likely to create space for extended stays or even partial residency in our home. With this realization, my hurt began transitioning to something more productive, righteous anger and cold determination. This was no longer just about saving my marriage, which honestly might be beyond repair. This was about protecting my parents, my assets, and my future from people who had demonstrated they had no respect for my boundaries or well-being. After a week of strategic planning with Vanessa and consultations with both financial and legal advisors, I was ready to reclaim what was mine. I chose a Tuesday morning when I knew Robert would be at work, arranging for a locksmith to meet me at the house with a police escort, something Vanessa had suggested given the existing lock-changing situation. "I'm the primary owner," I explained to the sympathetic officer who accompanied me. "My in-laws changed the locks without my knowledge or consent while I wasn't home." The locksmith made quick work of changing every lock and security code in the house. Inside, I discovered evidence that confirmed my suspicions. The guest room closet contained garment bags with Nancy's clothing, and the bathroom counter displayed her expensive skincare products, neatly arranged as if she planned an extended stay. More disturbing was what I found in Robert's home office. A folder labeled "House Modifications" contained quotes from contractors for major renovations, including completely repurposing the guest suite into a library with a sitting room, and plans to convert our home office into another guest room, presumably for visitors of their choosing. Most shocking was a partially completed change of address form for Walter and Nancy, listing our home as their new residence. According to dates on various documents, these plans had been in motion since shortly after we closed on the house, without a single word to me. With the locks secured and evidence documented, I arranged a meeting with Robert, Nancy, and Walter at my attorney's office, neutral territory where emotions could be contained within professional boundaries. "This is completely unnecessary," Walter blustered as they arrived, clearly uncomfortable in this setting. "Family matters should be handled privately." "I agree," my attorney replied smoothly. "Unfortunately, when locks are changed without consent and significant sums are withdrawn without discussion, we move beyond family disagreement into potential legal territory." I had prepared a clear, factual presentation of what had occurred, from the takeover of our housewarming to the hospital bills for my father's care. As I spoke, Robert's expression shifted from defensive to uncertain, while his parents remained stone-faced. "The $40,000 Robert withdrew has been partially accounted for through payments to caterers and event staff," I concluded. "The remaining funds must be returned to our joint account within 48 hours, or we will proceed with formal legal action." "This is absurd," Nancy interrupted. "Robert was simply securing funds for necessary improvements to the property, improvements that would increase its value substantially. Improvements never discussed with or approved by the primary mortgage holder," my attorney pointed out. "And as for the events of that evening, we have medical documentation of the harm caused to Peggy's father, which could potentially constitute a case for elder endangerment." That phrase landed like a bomb in the room. Elder endangerment carried serious legal and social consequences, particularly for people like Nancy and Walter, who value their community standing above all else. "There was no endangerment," Walter protested. "It was a cool evening, not the dead of winter." My attorney silently placed my father's medical report on the table, where terms like cardiac distress precipitated by exposure and hypothermic symptoms were clearly highlighted. Robert, who had remained largely silent, finally spoke. "What do you want, Peggy? Just tell me what you want to resolve this." I had given this considerable thought, balancing my anger with practical considerations. First, the complete return of all funds withdrawn without mutual consent. Second, written agreement that no modifications will be made to our property without documented approval from both of us. Third, your parents will not have unsupervised access to our home under any circumstances, and any visits must be agreed upon in advance. Fourth, payment of all medical expenses incurred as a result of that night. This is extortion, Nancy hissed. This is accountability, I corrected. And it is non-negotiable. To everyone's surprise, including possibly his own, Robert sided with me. We will return the money, he said quietly. And cover the medical bills, of course. The shift in Robert's position clearly shocked his parents. Walter's face flushed dark red, while Nancy went completely pale. Robert, you cannot possibly be considering these ridiculous demands, she said, her voice rising. After everything we have done for you, the connections we have provided. You left her parents in the cold, Mother, Robert replied, sounding tired. Her father could have died. How would that have looked for your precious connections? That meeting marked a turning point, not just in my strategy, but in Robert himself. In the days that followed, as funds were returned and agreements formalized, he began individual counseling at my insistence. The therapist, specializing in family dynamics, helped him recognize patterns of manipulation that had defined his relationship with his parents since childhood. They controlled everything, he told me during one of our carefully neutral coffee meetings to discuss logistics. My schools, my friends, my career path. Anything that deviated from their vision was met with withdrawal of love and approval. I never realized how deep it went until Dr. Harrison started asking about my earliest memories of making choices. While this insight helped explain his behavior, it did not excuse it. Trust, once shattered, cannot be instantly restored through explanation. I maintained my separate living arrangement at Vanessa's while considering my options. The most satisfying aspect of the resolution came in the form of social and community consequences for Nancy and Walter. Word of the incident spread through their carefully cultivated social circle, with my attorney's precise choice of words, elder endangerment, carrying particular weight. Invitations to key social events suddenly stopped arriving. Board positions were quietly not renewed. The currency they valued most, social standing, experienced significant inflation. Robert's sister reached out again, this time with other siblings on the call, all sharing similar stories of boundary violations and manipulation. For perhaps the first time, they spoke openly about patterns they had individually experienced but never collectively acknowledged. This family therapy of sorts seemed to strengthen Robert's resolve to establish healthier relationships with his parents. As for our marriage, it hung in a delicate balance. The core breach of trust, when Robert chose his parents' wishes over my well-being, and worse, over my parents' safety, had created a chasm not easily bridged. Yet, his willingness to acknowledge the wrongdoing and take concrete steps toward change left the door open, if just barely, to potential reconciliation. I understand if you want to divorce me, he said during a particularly honest conversation. What happened is unforgivable, but I want you to know I am committed to changing, whether we stay together or not. I never want to be that person again. I had separation papers prepared, but not filed, a contingency plan rather than an immediate intention. As Robert continued therapy and maintained appropriate boundaries with his parents, I allowed myself to consider the possibility of rebuilding rather than discarding our relationship. Trust takes time, my own therapist reminded me, and it's okay to protect yourself while you evaluate whether that trust can ever be fully restored. 6 months after that fateful night, our lives had found a new pattern. My father's health had stabilized, his cardiac function returning to baseline with proper medication and care. My mother's arthritis remained challenging but manageable, and the emotional trauma of that night had faded, though not disappeared entirely. Our house, truly my sanctuary now, had been reclaimed, room by room. The guest suite remained intact, ready for my parents' visits, which occurred regularly but always with advanced planning and clear expectations. The formal decorations Nancy had installed were donated or returned, replaced by items that reflected my taste and our actual lifestyle. My career continued to flourish, with the perspective gained through personal crisis oddly enhancing my professional judgment. Priorities became clearer, and I found myself better able to distinguish between truly important matters and mere urgencies. My team noticed and responded positively to this evolved leadership style. The relationship with my parents deepened through our shared trauma and recovery. Sunday dinners resumed, now alternating between their home and mine, creating new memories to overlay the painful ones. My father, never one for deep emotional discussions, found ways to express his feelings through small gestures, like bringing me coffee prepared exactly how I liked it or sending me articles he thought might interest me. "We never doubted you would make things right," my mother told me during one quiet moment. Even that night, as scared as we were, we knew our daughter would fix it. Their faith in me became a source of strength I drew upon during the more difficult days of rebuilding my life. Their wisdom about forgiveness without forgetting, about setting boundaries while keeping your heart open, guided me as I navigated the complex aftermath. As for Robert, our relationship underwent its own transformation. After 3 months of separation, during which he maintained his commitment to therapy and establishing appropriate boundaries with his parents, we began the tentative process of reconciliation. This was not the automatic resumption of our previous marriage, but the careful construction of something new and hopefully stronger. "I've never stood up to them before," he admitted during one of our counseling sessions. "Not really. I thought I was keeping peace, finding compromises, but I was actually just avoiding conflict at all costs, including the cost of your trust and your parents' safety." The journey was neither smooth nor guaranteed. We established a detailed relationship agreement with clear expectations and boundaries, particularly regarding his parents. Nancy and Walter were permitted limited, supervised contact, only with immediate consequences for any boundary violations. The first such visit was awkward and tense, but necessary to establish that the old dynamics would not be tolerated. "Your home is lovely, dear," Nancy said with obvious effort, the compliment foreign on her lips. "Thank you," I replied, simply, neither seeking nor expecting more. They had been required, as part of our agreement, to provide financial restitution for all medical expenses related to that night. This tangible acknowledgement of harm done was non-negotiable from my perspective, regardless of any emotional reconciliation that might or might not occur. The entire experience transformed me in ways I never anticipated. I discovered reserves of strength I had not known I possessed, and learned that standing firm was not the same as being rigid. Setting boundaries was not an act of vengeance, but of self-preservation and protection for those I loved most. At work, I found myself in a natural mentorship role, particularly for younger women navigating complex professional relationships. Without sharing all the personal details, I was able to offer guidance on recognizing manipulation, setting appropriate boundaries, and advocating effectively for oneself. "You seem different," my colleague Jordan observed after a particularly challenging client meeting where I had maintained my position despite significant pressure. "More certain, somehow. I learned that protecting what matters is not selfish," I replied. "It is necessary." Creating a new normal took time and intentional effort. Our home gradually became a true reflection of our values, rather than a showcase or battleground. Supportive friendships like those with Vanessa and Olivia deepened through the crisis, while more superficial relationships naturally fell away. I found a healthier balance between career ambition and personal well-being, no longer measuring success solely through professional achievements. The perspective gained through nearly losing my father made crystal clear what truly mattered in life. The most profound lesson was understanding that family is defined by respect and care, not merely by blood or legal ties. The people who truly deserve a place in your life are those who honor your boundaries and value your well-being. Sometimes those people are relatives, and sometimes they are friends who become family by choice. Standing up for yourself and your loved ones is not an act of revenge, but of necessary self-preservation. The boundaries we create protect love rather than diminish it, creating safe spaces where genuine relationships can flourish without manipulation or fear. When crisis strikes, it reveals the true character and priorities of everyone involved. This painful clarity, while initially devastating, ultimately provides the information needed to build a life aligned with authentic values rather than external expectations. Looking forward, I focus on creating a future built on genuine respect and mutual care. The journey has been difficult but necessary, and I carry forward not bitterness but wisdom, not anger but discernment about who deserves a place in my inner circle. Have you ever had to draw a really hard line in the sand with family members who completely crossed your boundaries? What did you do, and what did you learn from the experience? I would love to hear your stories and thoughts in the comments below. If this resonated with you, Please give this video a like and subscribe to my channel for more real-life experiences and lessons learned. Sharing these stories helps others recognize and address similar situations in their own lives. Thank you for being here with me through this journey. Stay strong, set healthy boundaries, and protect what truly matters.